And so people in more wealthy countries especially are using the Amazon. And when we cut down an acre of rainforest, or any forest, but especially a rainforest, we're not just cutting down some trees, we're destroying ecosystems that took millions of years to evolve, and we're putting into extinction many species of plants and animals, birds and butterflies, insects, bees, fish, mammals, and so forth. And so now we're also in the midst of the largest mass extinction of species on this planet in 65 million years. We're losing, biologists estimate we're over 10,000 times the background loss of extinction rate. We're losing hundreds of species every week, maybe even more, thousands. The estimates vary, but it's enormous. And so when we look at, again, at why is this happening, why is this mass extinction of species happening, there's one reason. It's people taking out their wallets and paying for meat, dairy products, and eggs. That is the reason behind everything. It's just, and to me, this is the enormously positive message inherent in all of this, which is that all this is happening, this devastation to the environment, for example, it's not because of some government program that we can't stop, and it's just sort of happening, like some war somewhere. This is happening because we, the people, are taking out our wallets every day and going to the stores and paying for the flesh of tortured animals, or going to restaurants somewhere and ordering this. But we don't have to. And I know we're in a sense, we're forced into it as little kids to learn this behavior. But I think it's important for us to just be aware of the ramifications of this for the environment, and also, in terms of just summing up here, to reduce our environmental footprint. There's no greater thing anyone can do than to move to a plant-based diet, especially if it's organic and unprocessed, whole foods primarily diet, but especially just basically plant-based, because it takes a fraction of the land and the water and petroleum. And this is well understood. According to the United Nations, it's about 30 to 1. In other words, 30 people eating the so-called standard American diet, one person eating the so-called standard American diet uses as much water as 30 people eating a plant-based diet. And for the other resources like land and pollution and so forth, estimates vary, but between 12 and 18 or 20 to 1. So moving to a plant-based diet is the greatest gift we can give to our planet if we want to save animals. And the other thing I have to mention here, actually, before I forget and go on to the next thing, is that wildlife is devastated. In other words, we think about, when we eat animal foods, the devastation and pain and suffering of the cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and so forth and fish. But wildlife that doesn't seem to be being devastated, as I say, they're being forced into extinction. And this is very much a part of animal agriculture, is a war against nature in general. I don't have time, I don't think, probably go into all, maybe a little bit later. But like in the United States, I'm not sure if it's true here in Canada, but I'm sure it's probably something similar. We have a Department of Wildlife Services that basically is at the beck and call of the ranchers and the farmers, and they do nothing but kill coyotes and wolves and bears and bobcats and blackbirds and prairie dogs and swans and geese and otters and foxes and anything that's trying to live out there besides sheep and goats and cows, they kill. They don't want them around. And and this has gotten much worse now that people want free range. They want some kind of free range meat. And so when the animals are stuck in these stinking sheds where no one can get in, I can't get in, nobody can get in there, they're locked up. Sure, no coyote's going to get in there. But now that we have this sort of new thing where people want some kind of so-called grass-fed something or other, then we have some animals that are more out there, and so now we have to make sure we kill more wildlife. So this is a war against nature, and the beauty again is it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to do this. We think we do. Like in my own case, maybe I'll just say this briefly. I was raised as a typical meat, dairy, and egg eater. I was raised in New England, Concord, Massachusetts, back in the 1950s. And I remember eating the usual meals that everybody eats, and I did not question it. I couldn't even begin. I remember asking my mother, I was about 7 years old, I said to my mother, "So Mom, the kind of food we're eating, is this what everybody eats?" And my mother said, "Yes, everybody eats this. This is what everybody eats." And I said, "Okay, thanks." And then she came back a few minutes later and she said, "Well, there are vegetarians." I had never heard that word before. And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, don't worry, I've never met one." she said it like these people live on another planet. You know? And then she said, I don't know where they get their protein. You know, they're kind of hypothetical people. They don't really exist because where would they get their protein? And my mother was totally right. That was the last I ever heard that word, the last I ever heard that concept. It was gone forever. And I remember going away when I was about 13 years old to a summer camp in Vermont. It was affiliated with this beautiful organic dairy. You know, it's kind of, you know, nestled in the Green Mountains of Vermont. It's not a place where nothing bad could ever happen to anyone. And I remember they taught me when I was there to catch a chicken. I caught my own chicken, and I put her down on this board on the ground that had 2 nails, and I had my axe, and I cut her head off, and she ran around spouting blood, and then we put her through the scalding water, and we ate the chickens that evening. And I remember when I did that, it really didn't bother me, because at that point, I was 13 years old. I'd gone through 13 years of the most intense indoctrination a human being can go through, at the ritual level of meals, daily meals with my parents and relatives and ministry, you know, religion, education, the government, the media, every institution in our society teaches us, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that these animals taste good, they don't have a soul, God put them here for us to eat. If you don't eat them, you'll definitely die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency. And if you don't eat them, they're going to eat you. Something like that. So this is the message. And I just knew I was doing what God and Jesus and everybody wanted me to do if I killed and ate that chicken. And a little bit later, a couple of weeks later, we went down to this dairy again, and there was a cow. She wasn't giving enough milk anymore. And I've now realized that when they're on any dairy, organic or not, even though they would normally live about 25 years naturally, when they're 4 to 5 years old, they're worn out because they're pushed, they're pregnant and lactating simultaneously. So she was probably 4, maybe 5 years old, still a young, you know, animal, but she was already worn out. And so we put a gun right here and just, you know, we took 3 shots. I remember it was like, oh yeah. But it was shocking to me. Also, you know, I mean, it's always shocking to kill a being that doesn't want to be killed. But just to see the sheer amount, actually, of blood and everything, and he cut these arteries right away, the dairy operator, and her heart was still beating, you know, so the blood just went, you know, just really went really high. And he wiped his brow very calmly, matter of fact, and he said, you've got to do that. You've got to cut those arteries immediately. That way, the heart will pump the blood out of the flesh actively. And if you don't do that, no one will eat it. It'll be soggy, it'll be disgusting. And you know, I've been a vegan now for 33 years, and I've done I've gone to slaughterhouses, factory farms, and stockyards, all these places, and researched this for a long time. And that's basically why animals suffer so much in slaughterhouses, because we don't want to eat soggy meat. We don't want to eat blood in the meat. So every animal is hanging upside down by 1 leg or 2 legs. Chickens, turkeys, pigs, cows, sheep, whatever they are, they're hanging upside down, and then they're totally alive. Very often they're still conscious, and then the arteries are cut and they die by bleeding out, which is probably the most hideous way, the most painful way. And so when we see a little piece of flesh wrapped up in saran wrap and whatever it is, we don't no idea what that animal went through, the suffering that they went through. But I got a little tiny glimpse of that when I was at the at this operation of this little dairy. But it was still, for me at that time as a kid, I couldn't question it. I was just, like, I thought this was the right thing to do. Of course. You know, if you can't use them for milk, you use them for meat. That's what God wants. You know, they're milk money or meat money, something like that. I remember going to Heifer. Have you ever heard of Heifer International? I went to their